How's the royal family? I pray that everyone is doing well. Well, my royal family, it's one of them videos you really, really, really need to go get your shit. Video is going to be quite long, my royal family, and very necessary. Last night I was doing research about the very thing that I was going to present to the royal family, and one of my subscribers, Carissa McKnight, has sent me some more, the very information that I was seeking. So thank you very much, Carissa, and I thank the entire royal family. I love getting the feedback, and also y'all emailing us and sending links and stuff, because it's a lot when you doing research and you have to pick and choose what you want to use, and then kind of scale it back too as well. So what we have here, my royal family, we see a scale, the so-called scale of justice. And the police in New York City, let alone their corrupt-ass union, are in their feelings. And we're going to hear today, over and over, qualified immunity. Very, very interesting. And so they whining. And, another word that we hear, well, we don't hear qualified immunity that often, but the number one thing that we always hear is police reform. Now, cops that are against all this stuff, they trying to make it look like the reason why and their force is corrupted is because based on the royal family, unquote, committing crimes. Don't that sound crazy? They imply that type of stuff. They don't take no responsibilities for brutalizing us. Like I said, every millisecond, somebody always doing something nefarious to the royal family. Well, as we watch America fall before the world stage, there's erosions in this white supremacist system that is playing out. So the police are eroding within. We know the foundation of the police has started with the slave, with the slave catchers or the unquote overseers and all of that type of stuff. And they want to have, they had free range. And as I speak, they still have free range to violate our royal bodies. And you want to make it look like, well, we cause what? That's y'all system that y'all develop. Y'all wholeheartedly gonna protect it because it works in your favor. And to even put something like this in place, it's like we know our folks, they know they folks. And we know the level of insanity our folks can be, and them too as well. But see, they don't call each other on the carpet. They put different provisions to protect them, and that signal them, they got my back and I can do whatever the hell I want. I mean, cops done committed every crime you could think of. So this ain't nothing new to the royal family, because some of us have literally seen the cops commit crimes right in our face. Because when they come to our neighborhoods, they really, really show their ass out. And when they, what I notice is they always come in to speak to the black community. Well, there's other races of people. So you're telling on yourself that y'all know y'all wronging us. And basically, when y'all talking this reform stuff, basically, and I said this a long time ago, they want to continue to control the narrative, and they want to sit down with us and negotiate how they can continue to whoop our ass and kill us, but make it in such a way that they are not liable. Ain't that insane? It's like you sitting before the enemy, or like Vicky Diller say, an open enemy, and negotiate what? There's nothing to talk about. to anyone. You're too damn late. I said that the last video I did. Now the Asian community talking about some bullshit to come together. No, what y'all problem is, y'all worried about your bottom line. And as we go on this journey, my royal family, I'm going to point exactly why they doing this. Oh yeah, that's that bonus video I forgot to tell you about. This real juicy. I know I'm milking it for all I'm worth. I like torturing y'all like this. So let's go on this journey. We're going to watch this first video. Well, actually, this is an audio, excuse me. And this was done October 6, 2020.
When Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old black woman, was killed at home during a botched police raid, her family settled with the city of Louisville, Kentucky, for $12 million in changes to police practices. The officers, however, were not charged in her death. And unlike their employer, it is highly unlikely that they will be successfully sued, thanks to a U.S. Supreme Court doctrine known as qualified immunity. Reformers have targeted the protection for police in the courts but have gotten nowhere. The Supreme Court has refused to take up cases directly addressing the issue this year, prompting a different approach. In the absence of court action, legislative action is available and I think preferable, former Minnesota Supreme Court Justice Alan C. Page, the first black judge on that court, told Bloomberg Law. Special protection qualified immunity protects government officials, including those in law enforcement, from civil suits, unless plaintiffs can show clearly established rights were violated, a standard that is difficult if not impossible to meet. To overcome a qualified immunity defense, plaintiffs must show that any police actions they challenge were previously found to be unconstitutional in cases with similar facts by courts in their jurisdiction. Courts expect the facts in a civil lawsuit to be an exact match to previous cases of unconstitutional behavior. Finding a suitable precedent is crucial to helping convince judges to chip away at police immunity. In order to press back against qualified immunity in the courts and in legislation, what's most important is showing the range of absolute egregious facts that have still formed a basis for defendants receiving qualified immunity, said Paul Hughes, appellate lawyer at McDermott, Will & Emery in Washington, D.C., and a member of the board of directors for the National Police Accountability Project. Slow process. The result of that standard, though, is that targeting police immunity through the courts requires a slow, piecemeal approach, with multiple cases in different jurisdictions, each with their own precedent and standards. When rallying against qualified immunity and tackling multiple municipalities, it's a local fight, said Barry Friedman, founding director of New York University School of Law's Policing Project. Making any changes an extremely long process. Advocates had high hopes the Supreme Court would reconsider the doctrine this year, clarifying the standard for federal courts across the country. 3 cases before the court this term involve suits against government officials, but the justices in May, in June, and again on Monday declined to take up more than a dozen cases directly challenging police immunity. I really had my fingers crossed that they were going to take up those cases and do the right thing, and they didn't, said Alexandra Brodsky, a staff attorney at the nonprofit legal advocacy group Public Justice. For Brodsky, it reinforced the view that progress would come outside the courts. The law can be a helpful way to make change, but I feel most hopeful when I hear about the efforts from organizers demanding change outside of lawsuits, she said. I don't know or think that the answer to this problem is only or even primarily through further litigation. Legislative solutions. Cases like Taylor's and the death of George Floyd in Minnesota did galvanize outside efforts. A coalition of civil rights and progressive groups including Public Justice is urging Congress to pass the Ending Qualified Immunity Act, H.R. 7085, first introduced in the House of Representatives by Reps. Ayanna Pressley, D. Mass., and Justin Amash, I. Michigan, in June. Senator Ed Markey, D. Mass., introduced a companion bill, S.4142, in the upper chamber in July. But advocates acknowledge abolishing police immunity in Congress is an uphill climb. Getting a bill through Congress abolishing qualified immunity is virtually impossible at the moment, Friedman said. There's no way that a Republican-led Senate will buy in. I think many Republicans, if not many people, see it as an attack on cops and so they're not willing to go there. Action in the states. Hughes pointed to efforts in state legislatures and cited a law signed in Colorado by Democratic Governor Jared Polis in June removing the defense for law enforcement officials. Friedman said other states may follow suit, but it's too early to tell. States are, in some ways, an equally logical place to address the question, Friedman said, but tackling the issue outside the courts brings its own political obstacles. There's a strong police lobby against changing those rules, and many people who are elected to do something about this will be perceived as being anti-police, Friedman said. Police pushback advocates told Bloomberg Law they don't believe there is a constitutional barrier to revoking qualified immunity, but Brodsky said she would expect to see police departments challenge any such efforts. Police groups have fought changes. Without qualified immunity, officers will also be less comfortable navigating split-second, life-saving decisions that must be made in the face of public threats because they know they will lack protection for their actions, said Larry Kozme, president of the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association. Stephen Schultz, president of the Colorado Fraternal Order of Police, mirrored that sentiment. While Colorado FOP supports increased accountability and transparency, we did not support eliminating the qualified immunity defense under state law, Schultz said. Despite that opposition, legislation still offers more promise to some critics of police immunity. When courts apply qualified immunity, they're just looking at the law and going to where the law takes them, Page said. But Congress has the ability to put in place legislation which would impact how qualified immunity operates. The work has to be done on the outside of the courtroom. The legislative process is how to go about change in this area, Page said.
Wow. Well, my royal family, what's amazing about this, again, this was published October 6, 2020, and and I'm not surprised, the judges would not even entertain it at all. Okay, now we are in March 2021, so that was October, November, December, January, February, March, 5 months ago. Keep that on your frontal lobe, because I'm going to point out exactly what's really going on. So, before we get into the next video, when I sent this meme, it spoke volumes to me. The reason why they are up in their feelings, one of the reasons why, we know they're cowards. They can have everything, taser, gun, billy club, everything, pepper spray, whatever that shit they use, everything. They scared to death out there, and then they it's like this. This is their playground. This is the very thing they set up so they can continue to brutalize us. But once you start coming at them and really stripping at the core, and they the first to holler, cowards do this, or like the statement we make often, a hit dog would holler, and so then they're doing them same tactics that they did a couple of years ago, where our communities were fed up, and this happened in New York, and it was like, well, we're not going to be patrolling basically the hood. Well, once the cops left our communities, the crime rate virtually disappeared. But they want to give the impression like if someone in our communities commit crime, we just look the other way. I know for a fact some people in my family then whoop some ass because somebody committing crimes in the community. We take care of our own, and we know our own do wrong, and but we need to deal with this. See, when the Nation of Islam came together with the Black Panthers up here in the Bay Area, they were the ones that patrolled the streets, and they let the ones that was, doing their thing, selling their drugs or whatever. They had a red light district. You cross this line, we're going to deal with your ass. But these cowards want to come in their little playground and fuck with us. And then when it look like they're not going to get backed up, oh, the bitch comes out. Oh, it truly comes out. As we continue on, we're going to watch this next video.
On December 9th, 2011, Three police officers and a K-9 unit responded to a call at a Louisiana apartment complex. There, they came upon 21-year-old Kwame Mason. Mason was carrying a weapon. Within minutes, one of the officers would shoot Mason 5 times. While Mason was on the ground, the officer fired 2 more rounds. D, as his friends call him, died at the scene. Mason's family sued the officer in civil court. In the ensuing trial, the jury rendered a head-scratching verdict. The officer used excessive force against Mason, but was not liable for his death. The reason? Qualified immunity, an obscure 1960s-era doctrine created by the Supreme Court that shields public officials like police officers from liability when they harm civilians on the job.
Kwame was a very intelligent young guy. He kind of had an old soul, if you want to call it that. I think it's a travesty. There should be no way in the world that a jury can find you guilty of something and there be no repercussions.
As the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Rayshard Brooks have reignited the national debate over police accountability, advocates say it's finally time to end qualified immunity.
Qualified immunity is a judge-made doctrine that says that when government officials violate your constitutional rights, you still can't sue them unless they did something that was so egregious that only somebody who was intentionally out to get you would have done it.
William Bode teaches law at the University of Chicago. He wrote an influential paper questioning the legal underpinnings of qualified immunity.
The doctrine of qualified immunity is a crucial part of the conversation about police reform. It's sort of fundamentally a marker that police are above the law and don't have to obey the same rules everybody else do.
The story of qualified immunity goes back to the years following the Civil War. In 1871, as the Ku Klux Klan terrorized formerly enslaved people across the South, Congress passed a series of laws aimed at crippling the group. In a nod to the reality that government officials often ignored, and sometimes even participated in, these racist crimes, the laws included a statute that allowed citizens to sue public officials who violated their civil rights. For the next 100 years, this statute, Section 1983, became the principal tool people used to pursue justice against wayward police. Until 1967. That's when the Supreme Court introduced a new element into civil suits against public officials, the good faith defense. Bloomberg Law Supreme Court reporter Kimberly Robinson explains.
In the 1960s, the Supreme Court had a case involving some white and black clergy members who had tried to promote racial integration at a bus terminal. They were arrested under a law that was later found to be unconstitutional.
The clergy members sued under Section 1983, claiming false arrests and imprisonment.
But the justices kind of read background legal principles to say that there has to be some kind of an exception when the officer had a good faith belief that they were not acting in a way that was unlawful.
In other words, as long as an officer can argue that he believed his conduct was justified within the context of his job, even if a court rules otherwise, he cannot be held liable. Over time, the good faith defense evolved into a catch-22 for citizens trying to sue police. Today, often before courts will even consider if an official's conduct is illegal, plaintiffs must first cite a previous court decision that ruled against an officer in virtually identical circumstances. Otherwise, the case is thrown out. Meeting this requirement has at times led to some perverse outcomes.
The Supreme Court recently was considering taking up a case where an individual was bit by a police dog while they were sitting on the ground with their hands up. And the plaintiffs had offered up a previous case that found that an individual who was bit by a dog who was lying on the ground with his hands down had been subject to a constitutional violation. But the lower court said that wasn't close enough. There was enough of a distinction between the person sitting down with their hands up and the person laying down that the officer was entitled to qualified immunity.
So a consequence of this sort of two-step process is that a lot of the time the court can say, yes, what you did is unconstitutional, but because nobody had ever done it before, or because nobody had ever said it before, we're still going to hold the officer immune, because until we ruled, maybe the officer wouldn't have known.
One analysis found that between 2015 and 2019, courts granted police immunity more than half the time. Supporters of the doctrine say that policing is hard, and officers shouldn't have the threat of lawsuits hanging over them while doing their job. But police reform advocates are starting to push back.
I think it's true that police officers have a really hard job. I just don't think we're doing them any favors by telling them, therefore you just shouldn't worry about what the law requires of you.
Opposition to qualified immunity has found some strange bedfellows. Lawmakers from both parties, and even the House's lone libertarian, have voiced support for abolishing it. But President Trump and Senate Republicans have called it a non-starter. Even the Supreme Court is split. Two of its members, from opposite ends of the ideological spectrum, oppose qualified immunity. But the full court has declined numerous opportunities to revisit the doctrine.
Just because the justices didn't act on it now, it doesn't mean that they won't return to the question in the future, and maybe even in the near future.
Qualified immunity appears to be safe for now, but in a moment of renewed focus on police accountability, advocates hope its judgment day is coming soon.
The doctrine of qualified immunity really offends sort of fundamental principles of justice and basic principles of common sense. And if you think about it, why should people who are sort of trained and given this, immense responsibility and immense power be held to a lower standard than all the rest of us?
We love him, we miss him, and I hope that something good comes of this qualified immunity thing. At least we can help somebody else if we couldn't help him.
All right, my royal family. Shut that all the way down. Okay. So, let's get over here. Let me read this to y'all. Qualified immunity. The courts found that the officer did not violate any departmental policies. Therefore, even though he entered your home without a warrant, shot and killed your dog, set fire to and destroyed your home, tased your 94-year-old grandmother until she died of a heart attack, beat your autistic child into a coma, stole several pieces of jewelry and hundreds of dollars in cash, falsely accused you of numerous crimes, we find no fault and the case against him is dismissed. We ain't shocked by this. Like I said earlier, the pigs have done every crime imaginable, and when Trump came with that campaign, Make America Great Again, it was a lot up under that statement. And one of them I seen was they want to be protected where they can just literally call us nigga all day and in and out, put their hands on our bodies, just no hold bars at all. None at all. And remember, because I say this often because it was deep when my husband, what he said to me, he said, when it comes to us, it's the letter of the law. And when it comes to them, it's the spirit of the law. And it's quite insulting. They'll be like, they committed a crime, but this but factor. And now these things that I'm presenting to you, and I forgot that last video I just showed, that was done last year. I don't know what month it was. And they're basically, from the two videos, it's like, that's going to stay in place. So in a few short months, what changed? What happened? Now I just said that about the erosion of the police force throughout America and them not being held accountable for anything. They don't even worry about it. Or if they get fired, they go over to another county. And things have to be put in place. And then the crazy part about it, it's our money, and they act like they doing something for us or, warning us, well, if you're going to push back, I'm not going to protect you. You ain't never protected us. We don't need your ass, But you want to be propped up and not held accountable when you do what you do to us. So you caused this shit, Again, pictures speak 1,000 words. Look at that. And there'll be more to come. But also what came to mind to me as we were listening to the video is when I say, look at everything with your spiritual eyes. You know, people often talk about the third eye, and I heard Dr. Phil Valentine say, no, that's not your third eye, that's your first eye. And your first eye gonna be real laser focused. And the first eye can feel and all of that. It has the gamut of emotions. But the enemy want to say you don't see what you see. When they get caught red-handed and folks is out here videotaping, well, what happened after the fact? I don't give a damn. What I see. Stop insulting my and the royal family's intelligence. So now, all of a sudden, in New York, everything went through. The council's like, enough is enough. And they all up in arms. What's going on in America? We out of our captivity. They going in. Look at what's going on with the Asians. These prophecies are playing out. Now we still are, feeling suppressed in their system. It doesn't like literally happen overnight, but things are stepping up based on their actions and also based on how they let them damn near get away with everything. So this is not surprising to me or the royal family. So now, I'm going to first give you this first little sample here.
Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Tamir Rice, Philando Castile. The list of names goes on and on. In America, one black person is killed by police about every 40 hours. Black teenagers are 21 times more likely than white teenagers to be killed by police, and 1 out of every 1,000 black men can expect to be killed by police. You'll often hear that these tragedies are a consequence of bad apples, quote unquote. But bad apples come from rotten trees. They are parts of a system of policing that needs institutional reform. Let's take a look. Standard procedures for holding officers accountable haven't worked. Officers are rarely charged or convicted for police killings. The threshold for what's considered criminal conduct for police remains extremely high, which often results in a slow, deliberate prosecution process before charges are even brought. Many police departments process complaints internally, and even when officers are found guilty of misconduct, they are not necessarily fired. They can be put on desk duty, leave, or simply fined. Needless to say, there are significant accountability concerns with these approaches. So what can be done to ensure greater accountability? There are a few things. For starters, we must ensure officers are fired for police misconduct and are not allowed to work in law enforcement again, period. This isn't controversial, and it has bipartisan support. It was included in an executive order signed by the president and the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed by the House, which happened to occur on what would have been Tamir Rice's 18th birthday. Second, we need to restructure civilian payouts by moving them from taxpayer money to police department insurance policies. The amount of money dedicated to such payouts is massive. Since 2010, St. Louis has paid over $33 million for police misconduct cases. Over the past 20 years, Chicago spent over $650 million. And from 2016 through 2018, New York City paid $565 million in police misconduct settlements. Research suggests that if money had been spent and used on things like educational work infrastructure, crime would actually go down. Establishing police department insurance policies will shift some of the burden for misconduct cases from the taxpayer to law enforcement. Now, the municipality would still cover a police department's insurance policy, but introducing this policy would mean that when a department's premium goes up, the city will know which individuals are responsible, and suddenly there's a market-driven approach to weed out those officers, or bad apples. The legislation should ensure that the premium increase does not come from general funds, but from police department budgets. Currently, Most payouts for police misconduct come from the general funds and not police budgets. Recent examples include the $12 million Breonna Taylor's family received in Louisville, Kentucky, and the $20 million settlement that William Green's family received in Prince George's County, Maryland. This means that Taylor's and Green's own tax money and that of their relatives was used to pay their families for their preventable deaths. It's a surprise to no one that 2020 has been a year that has highlighted the need for structural changes in law enforcement, keeping dangerous cops off the street and restructuring civilian payouts for police misconduct is a good place to start.
All right, my royal family. So, it's costing them. It's costing. Literally. Remember, my royal family, when I did that hangout with KD? And I said there is going to be a cost messing with the royal family. I went as far as saying, even thinking evil thoughts, you don't even have to execute at all. There's going to be a cost. Now, I'm showing videos that was done last year, and they talking about they ain't doing shit. You know, we gonna do what we gonna do. But money talks. Oh, it truly do. It gets, you know, that's, you know, only thing matters is money in America. You know, and, you know, they come off like they have unity, but when it start affecting their immediate situation, they start, because they slowly get a understanding. You don't get held accountable you could just do whatever. Well, see, y'all forgot the law of nature. It is dangerous what you doing when you mess with royalty. And don't even think good thoughts. Stay the hell away from us. All right? I know it's hard. And you will continue to pay. So let's get into this bonus video, my royal family. And we're going to go much deeper in on this.
The riot gloves, 68. The tear gas launcher, 299. The shield, 164. And this entire outfit.
Let me stop that. Forgive me, I'm going to backtrack that again. Okay, there we go.
This mask costs about $240. Those boots, $103. The riot gloves, $68. The tear gas launcher, $299. The shield, $164. And this entire outfit, about $500. Though all this may seem pricey, it's just a drop in the bucket of New York City's $6 billion police budget.
I have my own army in the NYPD, which is the 7th biggest army in the world.
In general, budgets are a statement of priorities. Those prioritizations are made by the elected officials.
But how did the New York Police Department end up with the largest budget in the nation? Well, there are a lot of reasons. First, Mayor Rudy Giuliani's 1994 broken windows policing. It leaned into the belief that a small crime left unpoliced would lead to big crimes.
If some guy is urinating in public, we got a problem.
That led to Mayor Michael Bloomberg's highly controversial police program, Stop, Question, and Frisk. He started ramping up the program in 2002.
To deter people from carrying guns.
And at its peak in 2011, officers made nearly 686,000 stops. 53% of those stopped were black.
Going into these neighborhoods with primarily people of color and picking and choosing people to harass.
In 2013, a federal judge ruled stop and frisk unconstitutional, but not before it cost the city $1 billion in police misconduct cases. Even as stop and frisk slowed, police spending in New York City continued to soar.
Police budgets, like most agency budgets in New York City, are created by the agency themselves. Budgets are a series of policy decisions that have been made over a number of years. Because of the size of New York City's budget, those policy decisions will carry from year to year to year unless something is changed.
The police department's budget makes up about 6% of New York City's budget.
The New York City Police Department's budget has historically been funded at about 92 to 95% by New York City taxpayers.
So how exactly is the NYPD spending these taxpayer dollars? Let's break down the 2017 budget, totaling almost $5.2 billion. The biggest chunk, about 91%, or $4.76 billion, went to personal services, salaries, wages, and overtime. NYPD officers are some of the highest paid cops in the country. On average, each of the 36,300 uniformed officers costs the city over $100,000 a year. Then there's overtime. In 2017, the NYPD's budget planned for $583 million in overtime.
You will hear about cases where officers make arrests around 5:30 when the tour ends at like 6.
A few years back, the council and the administration agreed to increase the police department's overall headcount by 1,300 heads so that they could combat overtime increases. But in fact, overtime has continued year over year to go up.
The officer that choked Eric Gardner in 2014 raked in $17,000 in overtime in the 12 months after Gardner's death. After that, it gets a little harder to follow the money. We do know the budget set aside $58 million for a new precinct here. $14 million went to new locker rooms. $64 million went to motor vehicles, and $104 million was planned for police training. During that training, 60 hours are spent on firearm skills, while just 8 hours are spent on conflict management. But this NYPD budget doesn't even include debt payments, health insurance known as fringe benefits, or the police pension. That pension alone is almost half as much as the NYPD budget. Combined, all of this extra spending comes out to almost $4.8 billion in 2017. In 2017, the city paid out an estimated $335 million to settle past claims against the NYPD. These were for cases of police misconduct, wrongful convictions, and an allocated $75 million for dismissed summons that disproportionately targeted people of color. Although settlements pay for NYPD mistakes, they don't actually come from the NYPD budget. They come from the city budget. In 2017 alone, that's more than $10 billion allocated to run the police department and fix any problems it causes. And the budgets have only continued to go up since. More responsibility on the police department hasn't necessarily created the desired outcome. In his 1994 crime bill, President Bill Clinton promised to
put another 100,000 police officers on the street.
But studies show it had a modest to little effect on crime. In fact, crime rates had already been trending downward since the early 90s. Remember when stop and frisk was ruled unconstitutional? After the program slowed, there were fewer cops on the street and fewer arrests. Meanwhile, violent crime continued to decrease.
One of the most effective programs that has really addressed gun violence and has been the Cure Violence program. Once there was a shift more to a public health model, there has actually been a more significant and consistent decrease in that kind of violence.
Another example, after the cop that choked Eric Gardner was fired, the president of the PBA union, the largest police union in New York, said this.
I'm sorry to say that we have to tell our police officers, take it a step slower.
He basically urged police officers to stop making arrests in protest, and they did. But as arrests dropped by 27%, major crime also fell by about 20%. A 2016 report from the New York City Department of Investigation concluded that there is no evidence that the drop in felony crime observed over the past 6 years was related to quality of life summonses or quality of life misdemeanor arrests. Even if policing might not have a direct effect on crime rate, it does have very real effects on society. Take stop and frisk, for example. In 2011, 87% of the stops were of Black and Latinx New Yorkers, but 88%, or 605,000, were innocent. In 2013, the judge who declared it unconstitutional said it was a form of indirect racial profiling, and it had lasting effects. Students affected by the policy were more likely to do worse in school, and young men stopped reported more symptoms of anxiety.
Really resulted in a public health crisis for Black and Brown communities.
It creates an environment of distrust of the police. It creates mental instability. We are trying.
Now, I have to say something here, and y'all have heard me say this before. The ultimate goal, the ultimate goal, is to damage us. The righteous of passions for our royal sons in America is to have some type of contact with the police. So it's all about damaging our psyche, because it takes a toll on you. And a lot of our folks have eroded within, being brutalized like that and having that psychological type of damage. But that they know exactly what they are doing, because they figure if they do what they do to us. Let me slow down, because I haven't said this in a while. What they are doing is investing in, especially our king's demise, because literally, and I've said this a zillion times, one black man's sperm can annihilate the whole planet, literally. And that's how they look at it. So they trying to eliminate as many as possible. But again, keep looking at this with your spiritual eyes, because things are actually happening before our eyes. But we're not going to be overjoyed, because we're still being brutalized. But we're seeing the erosion literally on the world stage. I am utterly shocked, but I'm not going to get overzealous. And there's a reason why we are separate. We need to stay up out of their places. And I'm not saying not to live your life, but we're going to have to start making some executive decisions. A lot of black folks ain't sending their kids to school. The Creator, you can see him in all of this. You can make all them statements. You can say they're innocent and all of that. That's how your system works. That's the foundation of it. Lie, 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 and continue to brutalize. And so they don't know nothing else to do. So I had to get that off of me. Let's continue on.
Traumatized. That is a living trauma, to be afraid every time you walk down the street of being arrested, harassed, possibly murdered.
These disproportionate arrests have led to high-profile deaths of Black New Yorkers and increasingly high settlements. In 2018, stop and frisks decreased to about 11,000, although the department has acknowledged that many stops go unreported. And according to this audit the NYPD sent Business Insider, these are all the mandatory trainings that police officers go through.
NYPD has instituted a lot of the reforms that people are calling for already. But where are we now?
The ban on chokeholds in New York City took effect in 1993. Eric Garner died after being put in an illegal chokehold in 2014. And there have been nearly 1,000 allegations of police chokeholds since. Body cameras were another attempt at preventing police abuse. The 2019 budget set aside $12 million for cameras and technology.
It is valuable to have that record of what police are doing through the body camera footage, as long as that footage is released to the public. And that's been a huge issue with the rollout of body cameras. Police department policies don't use body cameras as the transparency tool that they should be using them as.
The over $1 million spent on implicit bias training in 2018 didn't work as well as advocates had hoped either. Recognizing bias didn't actually change police behavior.
At the time that Officer Francisco Garcia was on camera engaging in that kind of rapid escalation and excessive use of force, NYPD had already instituted implicit bias training for all of their officers. It's been clear that these reforms have not succeeded in achieving the kind of structural transformational change that everyone is out on the streets protesting for.
As police spending has been put under a microscope in New York City, a lot of people are calling for reallocation of funds.
That is what defunding the police means, to take away from the budget that doesn't address the needs of the community and place it where it would be helpful.
To reappropriate that funding for education, for healthcare, for housing, for mental health services, infrastructure, transportation, and truly the services that we are in need of in our communities.
When you reinvest in the community and when you reinvest in services that actually address the root causes of these problems, we're talking about actually making our communities safer overall for a longer term.
So if the NYPD were to reallocate, how much can the police budget buy in other services? The cost of riot gear for one cop could get PPE for 33 nurses. The $1 billion being spent on new police facilities could build 17 new elementary schools in New York. The $635 million spent on NYPD overtime could pay for the salaries of over 9,000 new social workers. In 2020, the NYPD had its biggest spending year ever, with a modified budget of over $6 billion. Back in May, the city announced the 2021 budget for the NYPD would be $5.6 billion. But following protests, de Blasio said the city would cut nearly $1 billion off of that.
But those cuts never really materialized. In fact, the actual number that we estimate is approximately $420 million in cuts to the police department's budget.
The largest cut came from overtime, but sticking to this new budget is impossible to promise, since police overtime is often decided by unforeseen events.
We found that in a 2-week period at the beginning of June, when the anti-racism protests began, New York City spent $115 million on police overtime, which was over 4 times what the city spent in the same period last year.
On New York 1, the police commissioner also said,
Our homeless outreach unit was essentially dissolved with this most recent budget. The answer is much more complicated than writing summonses to individuals. This is a bigger issue. This is much beyond the police.
Some reported the intended $400 million budget cut for school safety officers was going to be shifted from the NYPD to the Department of Education's budget, which would have diverted the funds, not removed officers from schools. But for now, nothing there has changed.
The real only way to reduce the PD's budget in any significant way is to reduce the number of headcount. It's to reduce the size of the force.
The cadet class for October is still set to begin training. The push to reimagine NYPD's funding is following a trend of police budget cuts across the country. Protesters are calling for part, if not all, of the $115 billion spent on policing nationwide to be redirected into social services, education, and public health.
So what we're saying is, let's keep the cops where they need to be, which is to keep our community safe. Police officers are not educators, they are not guidance counselors, they are not psychiatrists, they are not mental health professionals, they are not case managers who can provide services to people who need it. So why call the police on issues that they do not have training, nor are they the experts in?
I totally agree with that. And let me get over here. Where am I? Yes. So, money talks. All the other stuff was bullshit. See, some of our folks get overzealous and saying, oh, they care about us. Now, we have the ability to sue them for brutalizing us. Actually, my royal family, they are gambling on thyself. They're hoping that the pigs will acknowledge what's going on and not continuing to brutalize us in the streets of America. And they're not saying just 100% stop doing it. They're not saying that at all, because they support it. City council voted on this. They've been, they support it because the city council, they the one that have the final say when it comes to, rendering the money when we sue them, doing what they have done to us, when we sue the city and stuff. So they're hoping that put enough in them where they can slow their behavior down. But they do condone it. So don't be fooled by these mere gestures. Because to me, it's like another form of symbolism. But we know cops got low IQ and ignorant as hell, and they going to squat, scream in the streets of America, or wallow in the streets of America. That's a better word to use, because you see Patrick, whatever dude, look like a dried up Fonzie. all that screaming and shit, that's fear. So you did it to your damn self. You know, money is an issue. Y'all won't stop. But see, it goes much further than that. I blame the government. They just look away. So again, there is a cost messing with royalty. And the momentum will not stop at all. Say, as I speak, they do everything 1,000% right by the royal family. That is not going to stop that ass kicking that has been prophesized. You know, and there's some out there seeing what's going on. And they fear it. And they like to come and talk to us about it. No, you can go talk to your people. They the one that's over here messing with us. We don't go out our way to mess with them. You know? So this is really a gamble to see what's going to go down. Me personally, I don't think it's going to slow them down. I don't think it at all. But what I do see is a lot of them getting off of the force. But I don't see their behavior, that's changed their behavior. It's like, Lisa Cabrera said this a long time ago, how important it is to execute or exercise their isms, that they're willing to lose life and limb, they're willing to lose their job, they're willing to lose their family because they just have to do it. They got a window of opportunity and they said, I'm going for this nigga. Okay? It is what it is. You know, I know it's brutal the way it sounds, but like I often say, wherever the story lands, it lands. I ain't gonna try to sugarcoat this shit at all. So we need to continue to keep doing what we are doing to protect each other. To hell what they talking about. And yeah, now y'all want to jump up and run around, start doing stuff. I mean, all through the news now, I'm hearing all of a sudden now they want to do some old bullshit ass reparations that's phony. They getting ready to do some mess like that in Oakland, California. Gonna give out $500 a month for 18 months. You know, so they be making these gestures, but it's not wholeheartedly. So at the end of the day, what they doing is protecting their bottom line, and we shall see. I could be wrong, but they gambling because it's costing them, and them folks is cutting corners everywhere possible. So it is what it is, my royal family. Render your voice with your beautiful divine words, and it's always my royal family. I thank you for your love. I thank you for your support, and with that said, Ashe.